morning, Rancho. Still working on a new theme song. All right, Sean Gordon here. I wanted to do a little recap, a post-mortem, if you will, on the William Lyons, isn't that interesting? Open house for Dove Canyon Plaza the other day. The video that I did last week, we've got something like 2,200 views so far, and the meeting, despite the wind and the rain and the cold, there must have been, 600 people that showed up between the two sessions. Now, to say meeting is a mischaracterization of what actually happened. This was not a meeting. This was an open house, like if you go to a new housing development and you see the available floor plans. This was sort of a joke. Now, it's organized like this very specifically because if it's done as a presentation, a Q&A, and you've got a group of people sitting there, then they can get outraged at a point that you're making, and then, that energy builds. And so they do this very specifically, and I've talked to some city planners that have told me they've seen this. This is a growing trend to keep that mob mentality from developing. Now, the owner of the Dove Canyon Courtyard, he'd actually put out the seats for the 250 people, and they asked that they be taken away. Now, what was very interesting is when I got there, and I got there a bit early, 15, 20 minutes early, and I, saw some people that I knew, and I went up to the table to get my badge, and the guy in front of me, he gave him their name, and I gave him my name. He's like, "Oh, I've already got your badge out. I recognize you from YouTube." So William Lyons watched my show. Thanks, William Lyons. And I don't know if that was meant to be complimentary or maybe a veiled threat. We're watching you. I don't know. I just don't know. The people there were friendly enough, and you could write comments, but the only comments they're actually interested in is which of the half dozen or so plans that they have for housing, which included up to nearly 400 units that are 4 stories. Oh, wow. Isn't that a step up from the 150 they were telling us 3 years ago, 2.5. My. So I was very gratified to see that Mayor Holloway was there. And he was talking to people, and I believe he is on the side of the people who would prefer it not change. I realize the city council people have to be a bit careful with their language, but it was not a Brown Act violation. He was there on his own. Now, Mayor Pro Tem McGurr did not come. He did put a lengthy response on Facebook. He was at a funeral that day. My condolences. I know he's experienced a number of losses recently. I myself had a teenage family member die last month and a friend, so I completely understand. And I'm actually somebody who has died and come back. It's an interesting story if you're interested. I had a heart attack 3.5 years ago. It was a week before my wedding. Ultimately, we got married in the hospital, and so a little bit of a romanticism there. I might put a link to it in case you're interested, but it is a bit of a cautionary tale in terms of the signs that you should look for, because it's not what you think. But I will tell you that as a method of dying, that was a pretty good one, because 1 second you're there and the next you're not, and it was weird, shall we say. So back to Dove Canyon Plaza. So Brad McGurr is encouraging people to show up at the city council meetings, planning commission meetings. Jerry Holloway appears to be as well. And that is what we are suggesting. There should be as many people as possible show up at every city council meeting and every planning commission meeting from now until this thing gets killed. And sorry for the sounds in the background. I'm in the West Wing library of my estate, and I forgot to turn off all the various electronics that are going on. I wanted to film outside. The weather's been very problematic with the rain. Now, it's important to understand that Lyon doesn't care what you have to say. They are not above misleading you. When they built Dahlia Court, their promotional materials talked about all the parks and the lakes and the pools. What they didn't tell you is you're not going to have access to it. And they're going to do the same thing with the development center. And they're still spreading the same lies about how it's a dying and failing center, while also failing to tell you about how how they've not been renewing leases and kicking people out or only offering short leases and trying to kill it. So this has to be addressed now before everybody's gone. And something I have been talking about for years, and finally it's starting to get some traction, is a moratorium on rezones. This can be done by the city council today because there is nothing in front of them, as they are fond of saying for the last 2.5 years. Do it. And the way to do it is you structure it that any large rezone, however you want to word it, dramatic rezones, have to be approved by the voters of the city. Boom, full stop. Because we have a secondary problem here. If you saw, Governor Newsom is suing Huntington Beach over a lack of low-income housing. We're built out right now. As soon as you rezone Dove Canyon Plaza, the state's going to come in, and all of those guidelines that we have to follow, they don't have to follow. The compensation will be bad. Every unit that gets built now costs the city money. We lose money every time. This is also tied to Chiquita Ridge because that's being held on to, I believe now, as a financial asset to sell off when and if the city runs out of money. Right now, based on my calculations and conversations, we will run out of money in 11 years. We are required to not run out of money. That would mean selling that for housing development. So this is why we need to get on top of this stuff now. If Dove Canyon Plaza sells, there's going to be it's going to accelerate the reduction in the revenues and the surplus until that time. And so you probably get down to 8 years. So anyway, right now, the people we haven't heard from are Tony Beal, Carol Gamble, Ann Figueroa. Now, Ann Figueroa, as a new city council person, was also blocking on social media residents of our fine community, even though it's against city policy. This was pointed out to her the other day, and she has finally unblocked people, but we have a failure to get responses. We're getting some nuanced responses. This is the question to ask these city councilmen, and I would email it to them. I've emailed it to them. Ask them, have they had any form of communication whatsoever with Raintree Investment Corporation or any of its agents? You have to be very specific with your language when you ask these questions, because what you'll hear is things like, oh, we haven't talked to William Lyons at all. Okay, well, William Lyons isn't the owner of the property. Raintree Investment is the owner of the property. I had some notes here. I don't think I need them. You have to speak up now because this process will take some time. I don't see how they'll pass environmental impact studies. You're talking at least a year on that. This has to get tied up. It has to be stopped. I mean, we could tie it up with litigation. There's plenty of lawyers that live in Dove Canyon. So these are the things that need to be done. We want to preserve those businesses. The idea isn't to drag it out as long as possible because we want to preserve the businesses and the people that are employed in there. So that means a decision has to be done quickly so that we can stop this madness and they have an incentive to build it up. Now remember, that plaza was valued for less than $10 million. It was not up for sale. And 3 years ago, Raintree bought it for almost $21 million. It generates somewhere between $150,000 and $180,000 a month in revenue. They're probably into it now for $25 million. So some of these floor plans they're putting out there of like 10, 15 luxury homes, no, ain't going to happen. They wouldn't break even. They'd be half their money by the time they're done. So that's not going to happen. The only thing that's going to happen is utterly pack it with as many possible housing units as they can. And you've got all sorts of issues. Look at the water situation. Every time we have a drought, which is basically 3 to 5 years, followed by a couple of years of not too bad, we can't water our lawns or anything else. And you're going to put 400 housing units, which would probably put you about, 1,000, 1,500 people in there. What about fire? What about getting out of there? We just had this huge fire over here. It was very dangerous. Came right up to the line. You have one exit point for thousands and thousands of people. The danger involved there, not to mention the traffic going through a gated community. You've got the Trabuco Canyon Water District is in that center. I mean, there's so many things that got to be overcome. There's a cleaner in there that's been dumping chemicals in the ground. I asked them about that. I asked them why they hadn't done anything yet. Why haven't they at least done the traffic study? It's not hard to throw that cable out and get a car count. And I go, well, it's more complex than that. You got to get people down in the sewers. No, you don't. You can get a real basic car count. You throw the wire out for a week or two, and now you got some basic traffic study. They've done nothing. And it concerns me how often we kept hearing the phrase done deal. So I want to wrap this up, and I want to thank everybody for their support. Everybody I talked to there that recognized me from this. It was very heartening and warming, and I appreciated your kind words, and I really appreciate seeing everybody get involved. Again, doesn't affect me personally. It's the wrong thing to do. And I think people outside of Dove Canyon Plaza need to be upset about it as well. And they need to get involved. They need to sign petitions. They need to show up at city council, because you never know what's going to be next if this stuff keeps getting out of hand. Remember how active the city council was in fighting Measure Z and the rezone there. Had no problem talking about it. I was at a lot of events with these guys when it was going on 6 years ago, whenever it was, 5-6 years ago, or maybe it was 4. In any case, they had no problem talking about their opinion then, when they were in groups, and when there were groups that were a majority of the city council. They were talking about how they hated Joe Dyson, and this wasn't going to happen, and they were going to stop it, and no problem whatsoever talking about it. And from my last video, you know that Councilwoman Gamble made no bones about the fact that she supposedly quit her job for 6 months to fight against it as a sitting city council person in her spare time. So clearly, they can speak on it when they choose to speak on it. So my advice is to stay involved, stay engaged. The next city council meeting is February 13th. Show up. The planning commission meeting for February was canceled. The one for March is on at the moment, unless it gets canceled. Show up. You got to show up, because what's going to happen is you're going to hear the city council people defer to the planning commission. You're going to hear the planning commission defer to the city council. And this isn't for all the council people. Like I say, there's 2 that I believe are on the right side of this, if you will. So these are my opinions, right? I've done a lot of research on it. There's things that I might be wrong on, but do your own research. This is a big game. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of things that have been going on behind the scenes. We need to find out, and we need to get people on record about conversations that they've had, because we know that they've happened. We have a copy of the email from about 2.5 years ago. We have this communication. We know it took place. So protestations to the contrary are wrong. All right, I'm at 13 minutes. It's long. I got a lot of companies that want to do the show. I want to get back to that next week. We will continue to touch on this topic as it comes up. I'd love to talk to some of the businesses in the center. So we're going to shuffle it around. I ended up getting a bad ear infection going to that darn thing, because I was at the tail end of that cold. Could hardly talk for 2 days. I had to go to the emergency room, urgent care, and get a shot. It was nasty. I still can't hardly hear in this one ear. But I wanted to get to you with this postmortem of what happened if you didn't manage to make it. It was not what anybody was expecting. It was very frustrating for those that wanted answers. All they care about is your opinion on which floor plan to build. They don't care that you're against this at all. And the only place you're going to stop this is at the city council. And the only way you're going to stop it soon is to force them to put a moratorium on this kind of a rezone. And the only way to keep it out of their hands of just taking it back again is making it so that it's up to the voters to decide. And we have to do this. We've been a sleepy borough for a long time, but there's big things coming. And we should do the same thing with the Chiquita Ridge. This is how we're going to protect ourselves. And, I'm not saying anything derogatory about, anybody, with regard to low-income housing or any of that. But we all bought here because it was what it is now, and it had a master plan. That was our expectation. We don't want these things to happen. We don't want to see a lot of this stuff torn down. Yes, it's getting cut down all over the place. I understand that, but that's not the conversation today. All right, thank you.